Welcome back. We've been talking to each other about logical fallacy, flaws in reasoning. And now we're going to talk about a broad class of fallacy called fallacies of irrelevance. Statements that are logically irrelevant to one another count neither for nor against the statement. So if I say the earth revolves around the sun, therefore we should legalize marijuana, well, the fact that the earth revolves around the sun has nothing to do with whether or not we should legalize marijuana. And this is a particular type of fallacy called non sequitur. Non sequitur is a fancy Latin term meaning for does not follow. If an argument contains a fallacy of relevance but doesn't fit any of the type that we're going to discuss in this lecture video, we can call it a non sequitur. But what we're going to see is oftentimes we can give it a more descriptive name. Some of those more descriptive names are ad hominem or tucoque or strawman or red herring. This is just a list. What we're going to do now is go through what each of them looks like in more specific detail. So personal attack is a fallacy because just because someone is a bad person doesn't mean their argument is bad. So if I say that Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine, has argued against censorship, but he is self-indulgent, immature, and a millionaire, therefore we should censor things. That doesn't make sense because just because he's this self-indulgent millionaire doesn't mean that censorship is necessarily a good thing. What makes something a personal attack is both a rejection of this person's claim and an attack on the person offering a claim rather than considering the merits of that claim. This means that not all personal attacks commit an ad hominem fallacy. Ad hominem for Latin for to the man. So if I say that millions of innocent people died in Stalin's regime, therefore Stalin was one of the most brutal dictators in history, that is true, and the fact that I attack Stalin as brutal is not irrelevant to the argument. Our next fallacy is tucoque, which is Latin for look who's talking, and it's a fallacy of hypocrisy. And it happens when you reject a person's claim just because that person fails to practice what he or she preaches. So when your doctor tells you to quit smoking, you should probably quit smoking whether or not your doctor also smokes. But just like ad hominem, just because you comment on what this person does in their own life does not necessarily mean you are committing this fallacy. Strawman is a fallacy where we try and break down an easier argument. X's view is false or unjustified, therefore X's view should be rejected. So when I say we should relax the restrictions on sales of alcohol to minors, and you say that's ridiculous, unfettered drug access would be bad for this country, what you've done is taken a weaker version of my argument. I'm not arguing for unfettered drug access, I'm arguing for limited restrictions. Red herrings are very similar to straw men, so it can be a little difficult to tease them apart. But what a red herring is a fallacy of distraction. So when I say, I can't believe you thought Frozen 2 was a good movie because Disney has unfair labor practices, whether or not Disney has unfair labor practices is not related to the artistic or aesthetic merits of the movie Frozen 2. What I'm trying to do is distract you, dodge the claim, and beat around the bush. It's what happens when an arguer tries to sidetrack their audience by raising an irrelevant issue. Looks like my clapping emoji didn't translate to PC very well, but this happens all the time, and it's really important for us to notice. For instance, when we talk about arguments of public health, and people try and distract by bringing arguments of the economy into question. And this is where Core 180 will prove to be very useful because we can evaluate both those claims with the tools we're learning here. And finally, we'll talk about begging the question, which might not mean what you think it means if you're not familiar with these terms, but what begging the question really is assuming what you're trying to prove. So restating the conclusion in slightly different words, or engaging in circular reasoning or tautology. For instance, if you say, capital punishment is morally wrong because it's ethically impermissible to inflict death as punishment for a crime. Well, that's saying capital punishment is wrong because capital punishment is wrong. And what you're doing is assuming the thing you're trying to prove. We'll end this mini lecture video here. On your slides, there's some practice for you to work with, and then we'll come back in the next one and wrap up with some behavioral biases.